Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Mark Becker, a podcast produced by Georgia State University. You can find this episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Google Play, as well as watch it on YouTube. In this and future podcasts, I sit down with leaders who are shaping the future of higher education in America and beyond. We'll dive into the challenges and opportunities facing higher education and explore policies and practice that show promise of a brighter future. I hope that you will find these conversations stimulating and thought-provoking, and if you do, please subscribe so that you will not miss future episodes. Again, I'm your host, Georgia State President Mark Becker, and today my guest is Dr. Rafael Bras, the provost of Georgia Institute of Technology. Welcome to the podcast, Rafael.
Nice seeing you, Mark. Thank you for having me over.
I'm thrilled to have you on the show, and really excited to sit down and talk with you about an effort that you've led in your provost role, the Georgia Tech Commission on Creating the Next in Education. So could you just start off by telling our listeners and viewers a little bit about what the work of the commission was and what it's doing?
Yes, the commission comes after years of, frankly, brooding over what needs to change. Mm-hmm. I think institutions like Georgia Tech are sometimes too comfortable, and the reality is that the world around us is changing very fast. Yeah. So we know that demographics of students are changing, the way they're learning are changing, what interests them is changing, what society demands is changing. The knowledge base is just accelerating at an incredible rate. We know that, in fact, the employees and students of the future will look different, racially, ethnically, gender-wise, and we have to adjust. We tend to do what works in the past, and as long as nothing breaks, we're sort of happy. But that's not enough. I would like to think that Georgia Tech, like you at Georgia State, we are innovative institutions, and we want to stay ahead, and that's what motivated that.
Georgia Tech's a great university, and you guys have always been pioneers in technology. So for me, it's exciting to see taking up this work of the future of higher education. As I frequently say, that complacency is the greatest enemy of higher education.
Absolutely.
But change doesn't come easy to a lot of people. Change is threatening, particularly if you've been doing the same thing or doing things the same way, such as teaching your classes or conducting your research labs. So, as the commission got going, was it an easy lift, a heavy lift? What was the experience like of trying to bring together, people from around the institute to talk about a future that looks very different than what made Georgia Tech great as it is today?
Honestly, in many ways, it was opportunistic. It came about as I was walking to announce a reorganization of our educational enterprise in terms of the groups that think of how to improve education. And I wanted to create a different ecosystem of the various groups that work on that field. And in walking over, if I'm ever going to do this is the chance, because everybody was excited. The actors aligned at this point in time. So I would argue that doing it earlier would not have worked, doing it later would have been too late. And so I just announced it, and at that point then went out to the drawing board and figured out how we were going to do it. We created a commission led by two very dedicated individuals, Bonnie Ferry and Rich DeMilo. They're knowledgeable, they're passionate. And then it was inclusive. We started with a group that went as high as 60 people with the mandate to increase the sphere of influences. And they were not given any particular timeline. Mm-hmm. They said, I want to do it before I go. but they...
So 5 years, 10 years was not a good option.
That wasn't a good option. No. But they went ahead and completed the work with at their pace, engaging people in a little under 2 years. Mm-hmm. And produce a report that has been very useful for us, and I believe very useful to many. So it was that idea of empowering people, that idea of saying, take your time, have the discussion, prepare well. That beginning part was very important.
Oh, the piece I have to take out of that story and highlight is just you demonstrated one of the great examples of strong leadership, which is you recognized an opportunity and and you just went for it. You didn't sit around and cogitate on it and debate. You saw it and you grabbed it and you ran with it. And I'd say it's a great success at this point.
It was. I feel very good, although at the beginning when I told my chief of staff walking over that I was going to do that, she said, "Are you crazy?"
Well, that's part of leadership. Sometimes you have to be a little bit crazy. Well, I guess, as I understand it, there had been a little bit of preparing of the ground, though. You'd had a previous effort around studying drivers of change, and so you had the ground prepared in that sense. Had you had broad conversations around campus? You mentioned earlier, changes in demographics, changes in the way people work. So did that help prepare the ground so that when you saw this door or this opportunity open, you were ready?
Well, actually, the drivers of change, Mark, were part of this.
Okay.
So when they started the commission, the first element, and they spent at least the first 6 to 8 months just doing this, just looking what are the drivers of change. Everybody knew, we talked about it, everybody had an idea of why are we doing this, but they try to then benchmark, quantify, look at the data, and so on.
Drill down, dig in deeper.
And that was incredibly useful. It goes to the concept of it's worth spending time early on preparing the ground and doing that brainstorming that then creates the foundation for the future.
Okay. So out of the work of the commission came 5 initiatives. One on the whole person, one on new products and services, third, advising for a new era, fourth, AI and personalization, and fifth, around distributed worldwide presence. So first, the one that catches my eye is, because I know the story of Jill Watson, is AI and personalization. So, where do you see, as you look out to the future, you look at already what Georgia Tech is doing in this space and being a real leader in AI and personalization. Where do you see this kind of work going and really disrupting higher ed in ways that are going to change how we conduct our business in universities, whether it's education or otherwise?
Well, maybe I go back a few years. I've been in the business of education for a long time in a couple of other institutions prior to Georgia Tech. And like you, I'm sure you remember the times AI is the promise, and it always fails flat on its face.
I was writing computer code in the 1970s, and they kept telling me AI was going to get rid of computer programmers in my lifetime, that we wouldn't have people writing code, and don't waste my time writing computer code because it wasn't going to be a job.
It just never worked. But I must argue, and I think the rest of the world agrees, that the time has come, that finally this is real. It's been advances in computing, it's been advances on data analytics, and the combination of both that has made it possible. That's true for any industry, for any business, and it's certainly true for education. What you referred to as Jill Watson was in our online programs, one that I'll love to talk to you about later. One of the professors decided that he was going to develop an AI agent that would serve as a TA during a class of AI, by the way. The students at that point were not aware
that Jill Watson was
a machine. Yes, that was a bot. And as time went on, Jill Watson became quite knowledgeable, was able to answer accurately the great majority of questions. There was always a human overseeing, making sure that if something failed, they could intervene. And it was an unbelievable success, and it wasn't even more so when they learned that it was a machine. So that, I think, has empowered us and convinced us more and more that we need to do more of this. It is efficient. It serves the purpose. It answers very much most of the questions that most teaching assistants have to deal with most of the time, and then save the person-to-person contact for the more relevant things that machines probably are not quite yet there.
Well, as I recall it, hearing it, and tell me if this is true, is that Jill Watson was the highest rated TA for that particular course.
Yeah, I don't know whether I cannot vouch completely, but I know that Jill Watson was nominated for the TA of the year, and in fact now Jill has in development several cousins and sisters and brothers.
She probably has an Instagram feed as well. Well, actually, in talking about that, you also touched on one of my favorite topics, because when you do start raising the prospect of a bot being the TA, and of technology coming into the classroom and changing how we teach. Some people, think, okay, you're going to try to get rid of the professors. That's the goal. And my answer to that is no, that the faculty actually need to be there to do what the faculty do best.
Absolutely.
And what the faculty do best is work with the students, particularly at the higher levels, the more advanced courses. I say the most powerful thing a faculty member ever does is, whether it's metaphorically or real, put the hand on the shoulder of a student and say, have you thought about going to graduate school in aerospace engineering? Have you thought about becoming a doctor? And doing things that machines aren't particularly good at.
It's that mentoring role that we humans do better at, and that in fact I believe faculty and advisors should be doing more of. And so there are a lot of roles that advisors do that really and truly are auditing type activities, and machines can do that very, very well and very effectively. So finding that right mix is important, but I believe we and many others are going to be moving in that direction.
Well, if we look at what I'll call manual labor, anything that can be routinized has been transitioned from a human to a machine.
Right.
And as I look at college curricula, for example, in the large introductory courses, the courses don't vary that much from faculty member to faculty member, university to university. So, like the promise of AI, it may not be next year, it may not be next fall, but I think within our lifetimes we'll see a whole different way of using technology to conduct the classes, convey the information around what I'd call courses that are largely commodities, taught at every university in large numbers, day in and day out. Like what I used to teach, Introduction to Statistics. Okay. It's as good or bad as I thought I was. It wasn't that much different than anybody else. We all basically teach the same material, use the same textbooks. So I see change coming there, but I see faculty having a pivotal role in the human interaction, the mentoring, the guiding, the inspiring role, as well as working on some higher order thought processes that happen on a smaller scale, so they're not easily routinized or turned in done by machines.
Yeah, I think you're right, and maybe it opens the opportunity to talk a little bit about new products.
Sure.
Because what you're talking about is that not across the board, but certainly some courses and early on in the fundamentals, content is a commodity. It is nowadays ubiquitous. You can find it anywhere. So it's not the content that is going to differentiate a Georgia Tech or Georgia State. It's the way that it's done. It's the way you engage the student. It's how excited they're about it. And to do that, you have to really and truly get into the mindset of these individuals and figure, how are they learning? What is it that I can do and to help them grow, not only in that acquiring a particular set of facts or content, but in growing as a person. And that's where the faculty member will always be necessary. But as you know, we have very successful online programs where faculty are teaching completely online. These are high-quality master's degrees. And I don't think by doing that we have sacrificed anything. In fact, we have enhanced what otherwise would be a commodity content.
Well, let's go there and go deeper, because you Georgia Tech, really pioneered, if you will, doing low-priced, high-quality master's degrees at scale, starting with your Master's of Science in Computer Science. So could you tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about what it is you've done to basically be able to produce the highest possible quality master's degree in computer science, to do it on a scale that I think is global, because that's another one of your initiatives is around worldwide reach, but to do it at a price point that had previously not been seen in this space.
Yeah. Well, I think a little over 5 years ago, with the initiative of the College of Computing and certainly its dean, Zvi Galil, we embarked on what really was, if I may say, quite bold and risky, and that is to take one of our residential master programs from one of the top colleges of science, of computer science and computing in the nation, and offer a master's degree that has no difference to what we do residential. It's the same title, it's the same piece of paper, it's taught by the same faculty. It was sort of different because it was the first time that any research university of our stature was willing to give a degree that way.
An equal degree.
An equal degree, not differentiated in any fashion. The other way that it was different is that it is incredibly affordable, which goes to the issue that we started the conversation with. So, what are the elements of change? What is changing out there? Affordability. We talk about the iron triangle, the accessibility, affordability, and excellence. Can they occur at the same time? We believe it can. I know you believe it can be.
And you're doing it.
And in the online programs, it allows us to make it accessible to people that could not drop what they were doing and come to Atlanta. We certainly have the excellence already in the programs. And the affordability, you can get that degree still to this day, the whole degree, for about $7,000. We now have a program in data analytics, and we have a program on cybersecurity on the same model. Frankly, the magic formula is excellence. Look at good people. Go worldwide and certainly nationwide. Most of the students are U.S. based. And affordable, and for that you need volume. To have that type of price point, you need large numbers. That computer science program has now approaching, it's over 9,000 students now.
Okay. On an annual basis, or what?
Enroll about 9,000. We are graduating every year now, approaching easily over 1,000. I don't have the exact number.
That's impressive. That's really quite
so
remarkable.
to the point that we produce over 8% of all the master's degrees in computer science in the nation, and to the point that we had to add a graduation because they come to graduation. They want to come to graduation.
They want to come get that Georgia Tech diploma.
And they are very much Georgia Tech alums, which was a concern of ours, as you would expect.
Yeah.
We pride ourselves on the identification that our students have with the institution, the pride, and they have it.
So they have the pride. They have the same quality product.
Absolutely.
But before you went online, do you have any idea about how many graduates you were producing a year in computer science?
Well, I can tell you.
Degree?
I can tell you that in computer science for that master's degree, we were admitting less than 100, on the order of 70. So over a 2-year period, you had a class, to round it up, about 150.
Yeah. Okay.
The difference is extraordinary.
So this is a scale project, not only in terms of making it affordable online, but also extending the reach of Georgia Tech and its master's program.
An order of magnitude to satisfy a need out there that even with this is not fulfilled. The need is enormous.
Well, that's as you mentioned, you've gone into other spaces. Do you have a rigorous process, or is it pretty much a back of the envelope when you think about, will there be another one and where will it be?
We analyze what the market is. Yeah. That's the key, because as I said, as much as I would like to have an experiment with many subject matter, to scale it, and if you want to keep it at that price point, and we're the only institution that have done that until very recently. There's one other institution doing it at the same price point, but to do that, you need volume. So you need subject matter that the demand is clear, that the opportunities are clear, that there's a hunger out there for employers and people to do so. I joke, I'm a hydrologist. I love hydrology. I would love to be the professor of hydrology online, but the numbers will not.
The demand's not there for hydrology.
The demand is not there for it.
Well, with rising sea levels, maybe that'll change.
Maybe that will change.
Well, it's one more piece I want to dig into before we wrap up this conversation, and who knows, perhaps we'll have future conversations. I hope so. But in the report, in the Commission's report, there's talk of the culture of a deliberately innovative organization. And so, just how is Georgia Tech, how's Rafael Bras thinking about creating the culture of a deliberately innovative organization?
Mark, that is, of all the report, that's the hardest part.
Yeah, that's a tough.
That is the hardest part by far, because it involves dimensions of inherently changing mindset and culture, inherently changing processes. Now, academic institutions are not, unfortunately, we're not particularly known everywhere for being agile.
No, we're referred to as a mature industry. Mature industries are not known to be agile or change-oriented.
Now, having said that, by the way, I actually think that's a little bit of a myth. I think we do change. You have demonstrated that very well. We have demonstrated that we can turn much faster than some of our neighboring large corporations and make the decisions. Now, but how do you create that deliberately innovative culture? Is education, is mindset. We're putting faculty through a training that is an accelerator of how do you do startups.
Okay.
So that creating that mindset. So think of how do you do startup in education in the environment of a Georgia Tech. So we're doing that quite explicitly, step by step.
Is that through Rich DeMillo's shop, or?
Well, we have is working through Rich DeMillo's shop, so the Center for 21st Century University, with another group providing the service.
Okay, terrific.
And that's working very well. It's a challenge because it's resources, it's numbers, and so on. But it slowly makes a difference. The other part is efficiencies on processes. And some of it is administrative, but some of it is faculty governance. That has to change. When to change the title of a course requires a long process of committees to deal with it, that needs to change. We should be spending that time in thinking about new online masters, new business models, not in changing course titles.
Better energy and talent on
exactly.
the big issues.
And that requires a change of thinking, a change of ambition. So putting your sights high and shoot for the star.
Rafael, this has been terrific. It's great having as you as a partner and friend here in Atlanta, and to see the work that you have led at Georgia Tech along with Bud Peterson, but really to see how Georgia Tech has really innovated itself and changed the city around it and changed the whole Midtown area around Tech Square, but also literally changing the landscape of education, particularly in the space of AI, online, new products, et cetera. So thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, this has been Conversations with Mark Becker, a podcast produced by Georgia State University. And you've been listening to a conversation with Dr. Rafael Bras, the provost of Georgia Institute of Technology. To hear future conversations with leaders who are helping to shape the future of higher education, you will find Conversations with Mark Becker on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Google Play, as well as on YouTube. Thank you for listening or watching, and remember to subscribe so that you will not miss future episodes. Goodbye, and thank you.
Goodbye.